Hey there, and welcome back to Richmond Woodworks. What we're doing today is performing a detailed review of the Carbatec Benchtop edge bander. So let's get straight to it. So what you'll find is that it looks very, very similar to the ones you can get from Rockler, Jet, General International, or Richelieu, if I'm pronouncing it right, I don't know. Steel City, and there's one also from Lange, although it does look a bit weird and it looks like someone's kid made it out of Lego, so who knows. But this thing retails for $799 from Carbatec here in Australia, and if you go back maybe 12-24 months, it was hovering around the same price mark at about $692. I found it on Wayback Machine. So the first thing I wanted to do was show you what's actually included in the box. So obviously you get the main unit itself, and it pretty much comes like this. The only thing you have to really assemble is this outrigging support table, and this is what the melamine edging sits on, or the edge banding sits on. It also comes with one of these double edge trimmers, and as far as things that are included when you buy tools, usually they're pretty gimmicky or they're actually not very good. This one's actually really good, so kudos to Carbatec for including actually a decent one. And then you get the usual user manual and stuff like that. And to be fair to Carbatec, it's probably one of their better user manuals, and I'll deep dive into what's actually included in it in a second and just do a bit of a review of the manual, because from my experience, Carbatec are really, really not that good at actually making decent user manuals, and I'll deep dive into that in a second. So the first thing you'll notice is that the user manual is actually in color, and that's quite unusual for Carbatec. Usually I'm used to their very black and white and terrible user manuals, but it is in color, and essentially what's broken down is there's 6 pages of safety, 4 pages of assembly and a little bit of operation, 1 page of maintenance and troubleshooting. But I found numerous errors within the user manual itself, which is really annoying considering how much you pay for the tool itself at $800. If you have a look at page 17, it says, if you want to clean some of the glue, it says follow the instructions for cleaning off the glue. But there's nowhere in the user manual of what solvents or what I should be using that won't damage the unit itself to clean off that edge banding glue. And you also have a look at one of the references. It says reference C2, where this actual gun's removed. I don't understand where the reference is coming from because nothing actually references that picture. I don't understand when I should be removing the gun. Is it a maintenance thing? Is it a assembly thing? Is it a dialing in thing? So that was one of the things that Carbatec really let me down with in terms of the user manual. It's not the first time, to be honest. If you have a look at my 6-inch jointer that I've had for a number of years, the manual itself is actually not even for my jointer, the one that came with it. And I remember frustratingly trying to find out how on earth I can dial in the jointer, because the information just genuinely was not available within the user manual itself. And I had to resort to YouTube, and thankfully Dave Stanton did a review and a walkthrough of how he dialed in his jointer. Although it was slightly different, I did get the crux of it. And these ones here, like your typical black and white ones, and they're pretty poor quality, to be fair. So assembly is pretty straightforward. All you need to do is just assemble this outrigging table, and there's a couple of little bolts or screw holes here. There's a couple of probably like 10 or 15 millimeter Allen key nuts, and all you need to do is just pop those in underneath, and there you have it. It's pretty much assembled and ready to go. So let's have a look at what you need to do to dial it in. So dialing it in is pretty straightforward. What you have is an in-feed and then an out-feed fence, and then you have this little roller that goes around. Now I've just put this little piece of paper here for a bit of contrast, but how you dial it in is you have essentially, you just use a steel rule, and as you can see, that kind of wobbles around a little bit, and the gap is probably about 1 millimeter on each side, and that was typical for your edge banding. Additionally, the recommendation is to adjust this fence accordingly to the thickness of your edge banding. So mostly the stuff you buy from Bunnings will be 0.4 millimeters, but if you want to go something like PVC or ABS edge banding, which is the higher quality one, that's probably going to be about a millimeter. And it's probably what we have here at the moment anyway. And for me, I don't really change it from to 0.4 to 1, just because I find that it works quite well as it is. So in order to adjust the width of the edge laminate that you're going to be using, you can adjust these little guides, right? So you can take them off entirely when they want to come off. And then the second part is you can undo this one on the bottom. Now, when you buy it, you'd really need to adjust these things accordingly. And you kind of want, as per the instructions, you want this, the bottom of this, and the one over here as well, to align to the same plane and only be a few millimeters under the top of the bench itself. So we'll take both of them off, and then what we're going to do is we're going to loosen these just so they're finger tight, so I don't have to use the Allen key anymore. I can just loosen them and move them up and down as I need, and then we'll get some edge banding and run it through. So this is just that melamine edge banding you can buy from Bunnings, and it has one side that's already pre-glued and the other side that's just your regular laminate. And this is just regular 0.4 millimeter edge banding. And what you want to do is run this through and use it as a bit of a guide to where you want, or how low you want the edge banding to actually sit. And as you can see, these two edges are, or these two guides are out of sync a little bit. So what you want to do is just literally unscrew it a little bit, raise it up, just until it nicely and neatly rests on it. You don't need to force it all the way up too much. So once you've determined the height that you want, you can use a piece of melamine or whatever thickness you want, just to kind of gauge where it's going to sit on the board itself. So here's one I prepared earlier. So if we use this thing and mock run it through, we can have an understanding of exactly how this thing's going to run through in real practice. And as you can see, it's actually running a little bit high. Cool, there you have it. So that's a bit of a breakdown on the Carbatec Benchtop edge bander. I hope you enjoyed that. Now, I did want to get to the pros and cons of this unit. So for me, when I was looking around at edge banders to buy, there's not really a lot of hobbyist, DIY, and maybe even, you know, professional / industrial kind of benchtop edge banders around. Probably this wouldn't be for your industrial kind of use. However, if you have an industrial shop, like if you're a van builder or something like that, and you want to edge band some stuff every so often, then this is probably more than sufficient. But if you're a cabinet making shop, then you're definitely going to go for one of those really big rigs that I definitely cannot afford, nor do I have the space in my little tiny workshop here anyway. So one of the things I did want to go through is some of the frustrations about this one. Considering how much you spend on it at $800, the build quality is actually pretty decent. Now, my only frustration with this specific version from Carbatec and some of the other versions from like your Rocklers and your Jets and your Langes might be a little bit different, but this actual top, if you have a look at the website and just look at it from like a visual perspective, it looks like it's like a very dense plastic, like HDPE or HPDE, or however it's pronounced. But this actually is not the case. It looks like, if you have a look inside the screws and undo one of these, it actually looks like it's a bit of MDF that's just been laminated. And ironically, on a laminator, some of the edge banding is coming off. So that's pretty interesting. Another massive frustration of mine, and especially after making this miter saw station behind me, where all the drawers are melamine that I've edge banded, and I think I did maybe close to 150 meters of edge banding. I think that's roughly 450 feet. So every single top of each one of these drawers has been painstakingly edge banded. So after all of that use, there's some frustrations of mine, particularly with how these edge banding guides work. So I don't think that they're actually wide enough, as in when you're feeding through some of this edge laminate, what tends to happen is it coils up pretty quickly, and has, especially when you go towards the center of it, the coil is actually even more tighter. So what tends to happen is, as you're feeding it through and trying to get it past this cut blade, what tends to happen is actually goes behind the blade itself. And if you have a look at any of my old videos, what you'll probably find me, especially when I'm edge banding, is that I always have like a little screwdriver, or in this case, an Allen key ready with me, where I'm constantly having to, while the heat gun's going, push down, pull the edge banding away from the cutter, and then keep feeding it through. So that's super, super frustrating, considering you pay $800 for a machine that's meant to make things a lot easier, but it really, really doesn't. So a massive recommendation for this tool to be updated or upgraded would be for those little edge guides to be a little bit longer, so it actually provides a bit of a slip to get past this cutter, because I find it, no matter how much I try, it every single time gets stuck on the actual cutter itself. So it's just annoying. It's really, really annoying. And even if they were angled out and these bolts weren't a hexagon, they were actually round, so you could adjust the angle of those in and out feeds. I would adjust the first feeder a little bit out, so naturally when the curve goes past, it will just skim past the cutter and you can still cut it. Just annoying. So I've only ever had to use this edging. So you can get quite wide edge banding as well, and these things support it, which is great. But I've only ever had to laminate 19 millimeter or 16 millimeter melamine edge, especially for that miter saw station behind me. So I've never had a need to really adjust those edge band guides too much. And once I calibrated it, I found that it was pretty good. But every now and then it gets out of whack, because you do get glue inside, and it can interact with how freely this edging goes through the system. And what I did find is that, especially on a very long piece that I had, when I was running that through, I found that the edging actually was starting to move up. And obviously you can't just move back because the edging is already on. You can't cut it and try again, because the edging won't line up and it's going to look very ugly. So having these types of Allen key bolts, where you need an Allen key in order to adjust these fences, is super, super frustrating. And because this heat gun is going while you're using it, you can't really adjust things on the fly, because those bolts are so hot, so you can't adjust them with your fingers. You have to use this while you're trying to balance a piece of edging for it not to go any more forward or back, or this stuff is almost like paper. So as soon as you move it back, it starts to tear and it looks really, really ugly. And I got so frustrated with one of them because it actually tore while I was trying to adjust it. And what I had to do is take it back onto the table saw to literally cut off the 0.4 millimeters this thing was and try to edge it again. So what I would probably prefer to see is these bolts or these nuts be extended out and have a bit of a thumb screw on them instead. So if and when, hopefully not very often, you do need to adjust on the fly, you can just do some micro adjustments up and down, just in order to kind of make sure that feed goes in right. But I haven't seen it happen too many times, but every now and then these edges do tend to wander up and down. And when you're halfway through a very long piece, you're almost in a panic trying to adjust it properly. So I find that you probably need to clean these guides after almost every single use, or every single stack of uses, because as you've probably seen with these ones, I do have a little bit of glue left over in there, and what I have to do is run this heater to melt that, and then I need to scrape all that stuff off with a bit of a putty knife or maybe a screwdriver. Now, I don't want to put it in solvent because I don't know what solvent to use, because the instructions didn't actually make that very clear. It's most likely going to be acetone or some kind of nail polish remover, which is acetone anyway, maybe even mineral turpentine. But what I'm probably going to do is actually take both of these things off, get a heat gun, heat them up, and then I'll just brush them out. Now, what you find, especially with this edging, is that if you do take a little bit too much time as you're running that edge through of the timber, the glue tends to melt and starts dripping down into those edge guides. And what happens after it dries is that you got to take everything apart. So then what happens is that you have to recalibrate it after every single clean, which is just annoying. So I'd really like to see, instead of these hexagon shaped bolts, maybe something like a bolt with thread, and have a few nuts, just like you have on your drill press, where you have a stopper, have them automatically configured to a place where all you need to do is just drop those bottom brackets down, or drop those bottom guides back in to the bottom, and then the top ones are super easy, because the top ones, I find, all they do is just stop the edging going too high up, and they only really rest on the top of this melamine edging material anyway. So one of those frustrations with the outrigg table not actually folding in or actually being easy to take off and on, what I've done is actually modified it, is I've cut those holes and made them into slots. So all I need to do is literally slot this thing on, and this doesn't need to take a lot of weight. This thing only weighs maybe about 200 or 300 grams, and it just goes in the center there, and that's it. So that makes it a lot easier to take this little bed or the outrigging table off and on, so I can easily put it away when this machine's not in use, because the reality is I'm not using it every single project. I used it for this miter saw station and the upper cabinets quite a lot, but once those types of jobs are done around the house, it's few and far between. And there you have it, my first tool review video done. I hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was quite interesting, a little bit different from putting boxes on the walls like I'd usually do on this channel. So I do like this tool. Don't make this video make it seem like it's not a really good tool to buy. Just the $800 price tag, just for those little few shortcomings that will just make your life a little bit easier and make things a little bit more speedy to kind of get through, I think honestly should be a standard and a default, and definitely need to be reviewed and fixed, because essentially this is a glorified hairdryer, roller, cutter, and guide, and is not super complicated. I haven't seen this tool really change too much in the last few years. I've been keeping my eye on getting this exact Benchtop edge bander for, I don't want to say about 3 years, but I've always just not pulled the trigger because it's a little bit expensive, until I started building a miter saw station. I knew I had a lot of edge banding to do, so that's why I primarily bought it, just to help me out. Glad I did, but now I'm probably not going to use it for a little while, so storage is going to be a bit of an issue. Luckily I can take that outrigg table off and store it away a little bit easier, but anyway. So if you do like this content, please consider subscribing or liking at least, and if you found this review to be useful, then please leave a comment. If there's something that you feel that I've missed or you wanted maybe a little bit more clarity on, please add a comment in there as well, and hopefully I could just respond in line on the comments. Otherwise, I can actually just add another little shorts or maybe a YouTube video in the future, just to address those comments or commonly asked questions that might pop up. So with that, I'm going to end this ramble. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you all in the next one, and take care of yourselves, everyone. Bye.